The crisp November air did little to cool the simmering resentment I carried as I drove towards my parents' house. Thanksgiving. Another year, another forced pilgrimage into the heart of a home that had long ago stopped feeling like one. The annual tradition wasn't about gratitude or family unity for us. It was a ritualistic reenactment of our fractured dynamic, a stark reminder of all the expectations I'd failed to meet in their eyes. Every mile marker brought a fresh wave of dread, a tightening in my chest that had become as familiar as the changing leaves outside my window. I pulled into the driveway, the familiar scent of roasting turkey and simmering tension already wafting through the cold air. Inside, the usual tableau awaited. My mother, a whirlwind of nervous energy in the kitchen, her smile tight around the edges. My father, ensconced in his armchair, a newspaper shield against genuine interaction, his gaze meeting mine with a customary nod that conveyed neither warmth nor welcome. Small talk, if you could call it that, was a minefield of leading questions about my career prospects, a polite euphemism for their disappointment in my unconventional path. They still believed I was struggling, just barely scraping by in my internet ventures, a vague term they used with thinly veiled disdain. Dinner was a silent opera of clinking silverware and forced pleasantries. The turkey, perfectly golden, felt like a prop in a play we were all too tired to perform. My sister, her life neatly packaged in a corporate job and a suburban house, offered me pitying glances across the table, which stung more than any outright criticism. I kept my answers short, deflective, unwilling to open myself up to the inevitable interrogation that always followed the initial pleasantries. I knew what was coming. It always did. The subtle digs, the thinly veiled comparisons to my more successful cousins, the pointed questions about my living situation. The main course was barely cleared when my father, always the instigator, cleared his throat. "So, about your living situation, son," he began, his voice devoid of any real concern, merely stating a problem that needed solving. "We've been thinking. It's not sustainable. What's your plan? You can't just drift forever." My mother chimed in, her voice a little sharper than usual. "You need a proper job, a stable one that pays the bills, not just hopes and dreams." The familiar lecture began, a well-worn script about responsibility, security, and the shame I was bringing upon the family name. Their words, usually a dull ache, felt different tonight, sharper, more cutting. Perhaps it was the recent drastic shift in my own reality that made their outdated criticisms feel so profoundly out of place, so cruelly ironic. I tried to explain, to offer a glimpse into the world I was building, the opportunities I was seizing. "I'm doing well, actually. Things have really taken off in the last few weeks. I've been working on a big project, and it's paid off significantly." I stopped short of revealing the exact numbers, the astronomical sum that had landed in my account just 3 weeks prior. It felt too raw, too sacred, too unbelievable to share with them, knowing it would only be met with skepticism or demands. But my words, instead of reassuring them, only seemed to fuel their anger. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses jump. "Significant? What's significant? Another one of your pipe dreams? We're talking about your future. You have nothing. No house, no steady income, no prospects." His face was red, his eyes blazing with a mix of frustration and what felt like genuine disgust. My mother, usually the calmer one, stood up, her face a mask of exasperation. "We're tired of this. Tired of worrying about you. If you can't even manage to take care of yourself, what do you expect us to do? Frankly," she spat, her voice laced with venom, "if you're so incapable of figuring things out, maybe you should just go live in the streets." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Go live in the streets. My own parents. At Thanksgiving. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, almost choking me. They had no idea, absolutely no idea. And in that moment, as their cruel words echoed in the suddenly silent room, a cold, hard resolve solidified within me. The words, like shards of ice, pierced through the familiar holiday warmth, leaving a gaping wound. Go live in the streets. My own mother. My face, I knew, was a mask of disbelief, but inside a strange calm descended. The years of trying, of explaining, of hoping for their understanding dissolved in that instant. Their outdated criticisms, their constant worry, their utter inability to see me for who I was becoming, it all coalesced into a singular, undeniable truth. They didn't know me at all, and perhaps they never would. The cold, hard resolve wasn't anger, not exactly. It was a clarity, a realization that the script they had written for my life, the one filled with their anxieties and expectations, was no longer mine. It was a story I had long outgrown, a narrative that simply didn't fit the reality of the astronomical sum currently resting in my bank account. The irony of being told to live in the streets by people who believed I was a failure, while I was secretly navigating a world of unprecedented financial success, was so profound it almost made me laugh. A bitter, hollow laugh that would have only fueled their outrage. I pushed back my chair, the scrape echoing loudly in the sudden, heavy silence. My father's blazing eyes followed my every move, still fixed on me with that mix of disgust and frustration. My mother remained standing, arms crossed, a picture of righteous indignation. They expected me to crumble, to plead, to finally admit defeat and beg for their guidance. They expected the familiar broken version of me. Instead, I met their gazes, one after the other. My voice, when it came, was steady, devoid of the usual tremor of hurt or defensiveness. It was a voice they had never heard from me before. "You're right," I said, my eyes locking with my mother's. "You're absolutely right. You're tired of worrying about me, and I'm tired of being worried about." I paused, letting the words sink in, watching their expressions shift from anger to a flicker of confusion. "You want me to figure things out? To take care of myself? Consider it done." My father scoffed, a short, dismissive sound. "What's that supposed to mean? Another empty promise?" I picked up my plate, still half full of untouched turkey and mashed potatoes, and carried it deliberately to the kitchen. I scraped the food into the waste bin, the sound a deliberate finality. I then placed the plate gently in the sink, as if performing a ritual. When I turned back, they were both staring, a dawning comprehension slowly replacing their initial bewilderment. "It means," I continued, walking back to the dining room, but not to my seat, "that I won't be a source of worry for you anymore. Not in the way you mean. You won't have to concern yourselves with my future or my prospects, because, quite frankly, I've already secured them. And you won't have to worry about me not being able to take care of myself because I am, and I have been, far more successfully than you could ever imagine." My gaze swept across their faces, lingering on the shock that was beginning to bloom there. "As for living on the streets, don't worry. I have a much better alternative." I walked towards the front door, feeling their eyes burning into my back. This wasn't just walking out. It was severing a cord, cutting loose from the weight of their expectations. My hand was on the doorknob when my mother's voice, now tinged with something akin to fear, finally broke the silence. "Where are you going?" I turned, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. "To my home, the one I bought 3 weeks ago." The words hung in the air, a silent bomb dropped on their carefully constructed world. The silence that followed was deafening, the shock on their faces almost comical. And as I stepped out into the cold Thanksgiving night, closing the door softly behind me, I left them not with anger, but with an unfamiliar, unsettling truth that would surely unravel everything they thought they knew. The cold Thanksgiving night air hit me like a physical blow, a sharp contrast to the heated, suffocating tension I'd just left behind. The click of the door closing softly echoed in the sudden silence, a sound of absolute finality. I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs with something that felt like freedom, mixed with a strange, hollow ache. My parents' shocked faces were still burned into my mind, a tableau of disbelief that I knew would haunt me, but also fuel me. My car, packed with the essentials I'd quietly moved out over the past few weeks, felt like a getaway vehicle. The engine hummed to life, a comforting rumble against the quiet street. As I drove away, I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see, nothing left to salvage. The streetlights cast long, lonely shadows mirroring the path I was now consciously choosing. Each turn of the wheel was a further step into a future I had meticulously built for myself, far from their judgmental eyes and their suffocating concern. The drive to my new home was short, but it felt like an eternity, a bridge between two vastly different realities. When I pulled into the driveway, the house stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the street lamp, a modest 2-story bungalow, freshly painted, with a small welcoming porch. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. The key felt heavy and significant in my hand as I unlocked the door. Stepping inside, the silence was different from the one I'd left. This was a quiet of peace, of potential, of ownership. I walked through the empty rooms, the floorboards creaking softly under my weight, each sound a testament to my independent existence. The furniture I'd bought, carefully chosen and arranged, was already there, making the space feel lived in, real. I touched the cool surface of the kitchen counter, ran my hand over the new sofa. This wasn't a temporary escape. This was my foundation. The act of buying it, of securing it without a word, had been a quiet rebellion, a silent declaration of war on their assumptions about my worth. My phone vibrated, an insistent buzz against the quiet. I knew who it was without looking. My mother. I let it ring, once, twice, a third time, before I finally picked it up. Her voice, when it came, was a frantic mixture of anger and raw fear. "Where are you? What is this nonsense about a house? You're coming home right now." I leaned against the cool wall, a faint smile playing on my lips. "I am home, Mom, and I'm not coming back." The words were steady, devoid of the anger I once would have felt. It was a practiced calm, a shield I'd spent years constructing. You wanted me to be self-sufficient. You wanted me to figure things out. Well, I did. I bought a house. I have a job that supports it. I'm an adult, capable and independent. Everything you always said you wanted me to be. There was a choked gasp on the other end, followed by my father's booming voice, snatching the phone. "What kind of stunt is this? You think you can just walk out on your family? On Thanksgiving, for God's sake? This is disrespectful. This is ungrateful." His rage was palpable, but it no longer held the power it once did. It felt distant, almost pathetic. I sighed, a quiet, weary sound. "I didn't walk out on you. I walked into my own life, and as for being ungrateful, I'm grateful for the lesson you taught me, that I could only truly rely on myself. Good night, Dad. Happy Thanksgiving." I ended the call, the click as final as the closing of the front door. The silence returned, but this time, it was heavy with the weight of shattered expectations and a future that, for all of us, was now irrevocably altered. This was just the beginning, I knew. The real unraveling had only just begun. The silence that followed the click of the phone was vast, a cavernous space I had willingly entered. My breath hitched, not in fear, but in the sheer enormity of what I had just done. I stood there, phone still in hand, the cool wall against my back a stark anchor in the sudden quiet. The house, my house, hummed around me. The soft sigh of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of a car on the street, sounds of a life entirely my own. There was a lightness, a freedom I hadn't realized I was missing, now swelling in my chest, but also a sharp, unexpected pang of grief, not for what I'd lost, but for the illusion I'd finally shattered. The next morning, Thanksgiving Day, dawned cold and bright, but inside my new home it felt like any other day. The frantic calls and texts started before noon. First, a barrage from my mother, a mixture of tearful pleas and furious accusations. Then, my father's terse, clipped messages, devoid of emotion but heavy with thinly veiled threats about consequences and family reputation. I left them unread, my thumb hovering over the block option, but I couldn't bring myself to do it yet. I needed to see the full extent of their unraveling, to witness the desperation born of their loss of control. By early afternoon, the calls expanded. My Aunt Carol, always the family mediator, called, her voice laced with manufactured concern. "Honey, your parents are beside themselves. You know how much they love you. Just come home. Talk to them." I listened, a practiced smile on my face before cutting her off politely. "Aunt Carol, I appreciate your concern, but I am home, and I've already spoken to them. My decision is made." The line went silent for a moment before she sighed, a clear indication she'd been given her marching orders. "They just want what's best for you," she finally managed, her voice hollow. "Do they?" I replied, the words hanging in the air. "Or do they want what's best for them?" I hung up before she could respond, the finality of it sharp and clean. The days that followed were a blur of setting up my new life and deflecting their increasingly desperate attempts to reel me back in. A certified letter arrived, detailing an invented family emergency that required my immediate presence. An email from my father's lawyer, a thinly veiled threat about a loan they'd supposedly given me years ago, one I'd long since paid back. Each attempt chipped away at my patience, hardening my resolve. This wasn't about love or concern. It was about power, about maintaining the narrative they'd so carefully crafted for me. I threw myself into work, into making my house a home. Every box unpacked, every picture hung, was an act of defiance. Every hour I spent at my new job, proving my capabilities, was a silent victory. But the constant vigilance, the knowledge that they were out there, strategizing, waiting for my defenses to drop, was exhausting. I knew this wasn't just a spat. It was a war. And the real battle, the one that would test every fiber of my being, was yet to come. I could feel it brewing, a storm on the horizon, threatening to engulf the fragile peace I was trying so desperately to build. The storm did arrive, not with a bang, but with the insidious drip of a carefully orchestrated smear campaign. It began subtly, whispers from distant relatives who suddenly found reasons to contact me, their voices dripping with sympathy for my poor, distraught parents. Then came the veiled accusations online, anonymous posts on local community pages hinting at my supposed ingratitude, my abandonment of those who loved me most. It was their last-ditch effort, a desperate attempt to weaponize public opinion, to shame me back into submission. But I wasn't the naive girl they once controlled. I was a woman forged in fire, and their pathetic manipulations only solidified my resolve. My father's lawyer escalated his threats, sending a formal demand for repayment of the loan, the very one I'd settled years ago, a fact I now had meticulously documented. This was no longer about family. It was about outright harassment. Instead of cowering, I consulted my own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who listened patiently to my story. "They're trying to wear you down," she said, her eyes calm and steady. "But we have the truth on our side." We drafted a cease and desist letter, backed by irrefutable proof of repayment and a stern warning against further defamation. The moment I signed that letter, I felt a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing, the burden of their narrative finally shifting, no longer mine to carry. The climax wasn't a shouting match or a tearful reconciliation. It was an email, a final, concise message sent to my parents, copied to Aunt Carol and a few other key family members who had been used as pawns. I laid out the facts: the paid loan, the fabricated emergency, the public slandering. I stated, clearly and unequivocally, that I would no longer tolerate their manipulation or their attempts to invade my life. "My home is my sanctuary," I wrote. "My peace is paramount. Any further contact, direct or indirect, will be met with legal action." There was no anger in my words, only cold, hard finality. I clicked send, my finger trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the immense power of that single, decisive act. The silence that followed was deafening. No more calls, no more letters, no more coded messages through well-meaning relatives. The storm didn't just pass, it dissipated, leaving behind a clear, quiet sky. The absence was jarring at first, a void where constant tension used to reside. I found myself checking my phone less, breathing deeper. The constant vigilance I had lived with for so long slowly receded, replaced by a nascent sense of security. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, flashes of guilt, the ghost of the daughter they wanted me to be whispering in the quiet hours. But then I would look around my home, the space I had built with my own hands, filled with things that brought me joy, not obligation. I would think of my new colleagues, my new friends who saw me now, not an extension of someone else's ambition. My new life wasn't a defiant act anymore. It was simply my life. The war was over, not with a victory parade, but with the quiet triumph of self-preservation. I had walked away from the battlefield, not unscathed, but whole. The scars remained, faint reminders of what I had endured, but they no longer defined me. They were simply proof that I had survived. I was finally free, truly, irrevocably free. And in that freedom, I found a peace deeper and more profound than any love they could have ever offered.